Hi guys, it's been a while. I attended the Reason Rally in Washington DC. Lots of fun, saw lots of people from YouTube. And while I was in the US, I also went to the New York-based sect Chabad Lubavitch, a Jewish ultra-Orthodox sect who believe that their dead leader is the Jewish Messiah. And I talked to some of the members, and they actually do believe that he's the Messiah and that he is still present in some form today, and is even more active in his current form in their lives through miracles and through teaching them things. They even claim to have photographic evidence of this. But what I wanted to do in this video is talk about a couple of things I heard when Matt Dillahunty of the Atheist Experience reviewed a debate he had with Blake Giunta, a Christian apologist, a debate they had on the historicity of the Gospels. And Blake Giunta, during their review, their joint review of the debate, addressed 3 points. He talked about his version of the die for a lie argument, where the argument is made that why, if the disciples were lying, why would they die martyrs' deaths for that lie? Another argument he made was that he could tell from reading the Gospels what the general character of the disciples was, that they were somehow trustworthy individuals. And the last point I wanted to address was his point about the historical reliability of Luke Acts, which is written by the same anonymous writer. The first one, the die for a lie argument. Well, first of all, we can't even establish how and why most of the disciples died. There's a great series on YouTube by Prof MTH on this. Did the disciples die for a lie? I think it's called. So even if we leave that aside, that we can't establish historically that how they died, why they died, if they even got the chance to recant in any way, and even if we leave aside the fact that they may have actually believed that some of them or all of them saw something, but that could just be something in their grief-stricken state that they psychologically experienced, but there's nothing to it, but they actually believe that this was somehow the presence of their rabbi, their teacher. So even if we leave all of that aside and assume for the sake of argument that they actually lied, I could think of a much more likely reason why they could have lied. I mean, the thing is that they were part of an honor culture, just like you find in Afghanistan today. The family is everything. The honor of the family is everything. So if you were arrested by the authorities and given a chance to recant your beliefs, your family within the community you live, within the early Christian community, would have had a high social status because of your status. And saying that you had lied would lower that status and would shame your family. So that would be a very reasonable reason to lie, to maintain the social status and the honor of your family. So that's one thing. Then the point he made about what was it? The general character of the disciples. I mean, I'm reminded when I hear this. I live here in Sweden. I'm reminded of the example of Emanuel Swedenborg. He was a Swedish scientist, a philosopher, a theologian, but also a crazy mystic. He said he had all kinds of divine experiences and visions, and off of these visions he created a completely unique theology. And was this man a lunatic? Was this man an intelligent man? Was he a fraud? Was he deluded? Was he crazy? Was he a mythomaniac? I mean, all of it together. It's not because you can. I mean, it's very rare that reality is so tidy in tidy categories of an honest person or a crazy person especially in these kinds of religious cults. And that's, I felt, a kind of an essentialist mistake that Blake Giunta made in his whole case of trying to debunk alternative accounts of what historically happened. He tries to put everything in an either or. Either it's they lied or they were tripping somehow. It's a kind of a joint vision they had, a delusion they had. And reality is usually not that tidy. It's either the delusion model, or it's the lie model, or it's the perpetrating of an elaborate hoax model, etc. Take the case of the miracle of the sun at Fatima. You had a child there who was living in a historic, in a very religious context. She was prone to a lot of. She was very prone to fantastical explanations. She had a lot of imagination, and within that context, she thought there would be a miracle on a certain day. She told people to look at the sun, and of course, people started to look at the sun. So you have a physical phenomenon of their eyes being affected, so they're actually seeing something. But then that something gets realigned to. I mean, they would have had different accounts of what they were seeing, because the sun would have had a different effect on the different eyes of the different people. But as they contaminate each other's stories and try to make a religious narrative out of it, the stories get aligned. And so you have a really messy situation of what happens during and in the aftermath of these so-called miraculous events. And then the last point that Giunta made was about the historical reliability of Luke and Acts, and for that I have to return to what I mentioned in the beginning, the Rebbe, the rabbi of that ultra-Orthodox sect, who they claim is the Messiah. I mean, in the case of this Rebbe, whose name was Menachem Mendel Schneerson, we have the accounts of his followers, which include a lot of myth-making, a lot of stories about his miracles. Even to this day, after his death, people visit his grave to ask him to intervene on their behalf. And these religious accounts of who the Rebbe was differ markedly from the secular accounts of his life. We can look at the research of certain anthropologists who visited and lived with them. And when we put those stories, those religious accounts, next to the secular accounts, we get a completely different picture. Now imagine that in about 2,000 years, all we have left is the religious account, and all the secular accounts have vanished. I mean, Giunta would have us believe that we would be justified in believing these religious accounts, because there are certain historical details, like Menachem was born in that place in Europe. He attended that university in Paris. He lived in that neighborhood, Crown Heights in New York City. So all these historical details that he would say show that the rest of the story must be historically reliable as well. So including all the supernatural and miraculous stuff. He claims that is makes Luke, Acts, and the other Gospels historically reliable, but then he would have to admit that he would have to believe the religious accounts of Menachem as well if he didn't have access to the secular accounts. So that's what I wanted to address about the arguments of Blake Giunta. Yeah, let me know what you think. I'm enjoying the sunset here in my part of Sweden. Hope you have a nice evening, or whatever time it is where you live.